My name is Ethan, and if I'm being honest, this wasn't the first time I felt humiliated at that dinner table. But that night, something was different. Something I could no longer ignore. I'm a plumber. I leave the house before the sun rises. And most days, I don't come back until it's already dark. The work isn't easy. My hands get dirty. My body wears down, but I never complained because in my mind, there was always one thought. You have to work hard for your family. And honestly, that belief slowly became my biggest weakness. But the real story doesn't start that night. It starts 5 years earlier, when one evening, my wife said to me, "Dad lost his job. Can he stay with us for a few days?" I said yes without even thinking, because to me, it wasn't a big decision. My father always used to say, "A man doesn't leave his family alone in hard times." And at that moment, I believed I was doing the right thing. In the beginning, everything was fine. Her parents stayed in the guest room. They were quiet and sometimes even said thank you. I thought everything was under control, but then things started to change. A few weeks later, her younger brother showed up, just for a little while, she said. Then her sister came. She needs some help too, she explained. And slowly, weeks turned into months, months into years. And one day I realized that in my 3-bedroom house, there were now 7 people living. And out of those 7, only one person was working. Me, the house. I had bought before the marriage. The loan was in my name. Every bill I paid month after month. But the strange part was, even then, I was never enough. Every day, I came home exhausted from work, and that's when the real exhaustion began. Her mother's voice, "You need to work harder. What are you going to do with such low income? You can do better." At first, I ignored it. Then I learned to tolerate it. And eventually, it became a part of my daily life. But there's something I didn't understand back then. Staying silent doesn't always bring peace. Sometimes, it teaches people that they can treat you however they want. And the hardest part? My wife. She never spoke against me, but she never spoke for me either. And slowly, I started to feel this was no longer our home. It had become a place where I was just a guy paying the bills. But still, I stayed because somewhere deep down, I was afraid if I stood up, everything would fall apart. And maybe I would too. But I didn't know the real breaking point was still ahead, because what happened that night at the dinner table changed everything forever. But before that, there's something you need to understand. Why did I stay silent for 5 years? The truth is, it wasn't just helplessness. It was my mindset. I always believed if there's a problem at home, you don't run away from it. You fix it. And every time things got worse, I told myself, just a little longer, everything would be okay. But the truth was, nothing was getting better. And maybe I was the last person ready to accept that. Every day started to feel the same. Work in the morning, home exhausted in the evening, and then the same voices. But the worst part wasn't that they weren't doing anything. The worst part was they believed it was their right. One day, I came home completely drained from work. I had worked all day in the rain. My clothes were wet, my hands were cold, my body was aching. When I got home, I saw food on the dining table. But no one had even called me. Everyone had already eaten, and the sink was full of dishes. I said nothing. I quietly changed my clothes and heated food for myself. But the moment I sat down, her mother said, "You need to fix your timing. Everything can't run according to you." I looked at her, and for the first time, a question came into my mind. Is this my house or am I a guest here? But even then, I said nothing because I thought if I spoke, things would escalate. And I didn't want to fight. But that was my biggest mistake because every time I chose silence, they chose to speak louder. Slowly, it stopped being just words. It became a habit. They started making decisions about my house, who would sleep where, how things would be used, who needed what, and me, I just listened. But the hardest part was still left. My wife. Every time I hoped Just once, she would say, "That's enough." But she never did. Once, I even tried talking to her. I said, "We need to set some boundaries." She stayed quiet. Then she said, "This is my family. Why can't you understand that?" That one line made me think, because for the first time, I realized I was not her priority. And still, I stayed. Why? Because somewhere I believed that if I left, I would lose. I would become the man who ran away from responsibility. And I didn't want to be that man. But what was the truth? I wasn't running away. I was trapped. And slowly, I was starting to understand that. Every day, little by little, until one day, everything changed. That day felt completely normal, just like every other day. But that day, I didn't stay silent. And maybe they weren't expecting it either, because what I said at that dinner table changed everything. But before that moment, everything felt completely normal. The same dining table, the same people, the same atmosphere, and the same voice. Her mother's. "You need to work harder. This is enough." I was sitting quietly, just like I always did. But that day, something was different. Maybe I was more exhausted. Maybe everything had finally built up inside me. Or maybe, for the first time, I was seeing myself clearly. I looked around. Her brother lost his phone. Her sister laughing. Her father sitting silently. And my wife, she was just watching. Like all of this was completely normal. And then her mother said it again. "If you could earn more, this house would be in a better condition." That was it. Right there, something broke. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get angry. For the first time, I simply responded calmly. If I wasn't covering everyone's expenses here, things might already be different. That's it. One line. But after that line, the entire room went silent. A silence that had never existed before. For the first time, I saw everyone looking at me. And then my wife stood up, slowly. Her face had changed. There was anger in her eyes. And something else. Something I had never seen before. "What did you just say?" Her voice was sharp, but I stayed calm. I didn't repeat myself. Because now I understood this wasn't just a response. This was a boundary that I had drawn for the first time. And maybe they didn't like that. The next moment, she walked toward me so fast, I didn't even have time to react. And then, for a second, everything stopped. A sound echoed. And after that, just silence. I stayed seated. There was a slight burning on my face. But more than that, there was something else. Something deeper. Something that went all the way inside. I slowly lifted my head, looked around. No one said anything. No one stood up. No one took my side. Her father, silent. Her brother, silent. Her mother, just watching. And my wife, still standing there, angry. "Don't talk to my mom like that," she said. And in that moment, everything became clear. That wasn't just a slap. It was an answer to my place, to my value. And honestly, for the first time, I understood who I was in that house, or maybe what I had become. And in that moment, something inside me changed. I didn't say anything. I didn't argue. I simply stood up. The chair slid back, made a sound, but no one cared. I walked toward the stairs. With every step, one thing became clearer. I was not the same person I had been 5 years ago. I went upstairs, pulled out a bag, and started packing clothes. No thinking, no hesitation, because there was nothing left to think about. When I came downstairs, everyone was still sitting there, as if nothing had happened. I looked at her once, then walked toward the door. And in that moment, I made a decision that was going to change their lives. But they had no idea yet, because that night, I wasn't angry. I was completely calm. And maybe for the first time, I was thinking clearly. I stepped outside. The cold air hit my face. But inside, there was a strange kind of peace. I sat in my truck, stared at the steering wheel for a few seconds, and then I picked up my phone. This was the call I should have made years ago. "Steve, I need to see you right now," I said. He was my lawyer, and a little while later, I was sitting in his office. He looked at me and asked, "What happened?" I told him everything. The last 5 years, piece by piece. He listened quietly. Then he asked one direct question. "Whose name is the house in?" "Mine," I said. "Bought before the marriage?" "Yes." He leaned back in his chair. "Then you have control," he said. That was it. The word I needed to hear. Control. For the first time in 5 years. I felt like things were in my hands. "So what do we do now?" I asked. Without hesitation, he said, "First we file for divorce." I nodded. No hesitation. Because deep down, I had already made that decision. The next morning, the paperwork was filed. Everything was official. But the real change was just beginning. I checked all my accounts. Electricity in my name. Water in my name. Internet in my name. And then I started making calls. "I want to disconnect service at this address." With every call, something was being cut off. But strangely, I didn't feel guilty. Because for the first time, I was doing what was right. By afternoon, one more thing was left. Locks. I called a locksmith. "I need all the locks changed," I said. He arrived at the house and got to work quickly. Front door, back door, garage. Everything was changed. And when he left, I stood in front of the door for a few seconds. It was the same house, but for the first time, it felt like mine again. By evening, the first call came. My wife. I answered. "What did you do?" Her voice was panicked. Calmly, I said, "What needed to be done?" "We can't get inside," she said. "I know," I replied. A few seconds of silence. Then her tone changed. "You can't do this. This is our house." For the first time, I stopped her. "No," I said quietly, "this is my house." And in that moment, I knew everything had changed. But this was just the beginning. Over the next few hours, the calls didn't stop. Her brother angry. Her father making threats. Her mother blaming me. And then my wife again. This time, there was no anger in her voice. There was fear. "Please, let us come back," she said. But this time, I didn't respond. Because now I understood. This wasn't an apology. This was helplessness. And that night, for the first time, they were feeling what I had felt for 5 years. But they still didn't realize one thing. I wasn't going to stop here. But they still didn't realize one thing. I wasn't going to stop here. Over the next few days, everything started changing fast. My lawyer had already pushed the process forward. And for the first time, I wasn't dragging something out. I was ending it. The divorce papers had been served. Everything was official now. And from that moment, their real struggle began. First came anger. Phone calls, messages, accusations. "You took our home. You're selfish. We'll see you in court." I just listened because now I understood these were the same people who stayed silent when I needed to speak. Then slowly, their anger turned into fear. They started looking for a place to stay. No one had a plan because for 5 years, they never needed one. I was their plan. And now I wasn't there. A few days later, my wife came to meet me. For the first time, she was alone. There was exhaustion in her eyes. And something else. Something I had never seen before. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. I nodded. We stood there in silence for a few seconds. Then she said, "I made a mistake." I didn't respond because I knew those words had come too late. "I didn't stand by you. I should have," she continued. Her voice was breaking. But this time, I didn't get pulled into her emotions because now I could see clearly. This wasn't regret. This was consequence. "If you come back, we can fix everything," she said. I looked at her. For a few seconds, I just looked at her and then quietly said, "Everything is already fixed." She didn't understand, but I did. I turned and walked away. 6 weeks later, it was all over. The divorce was finalized. The house stayed with me. No alimony, no complications, just a clean ending. And then the day came when I was back in my house, alone, no noise, no complaints, no expectations, just peace. I was sitting on the porch, a cold beer in my hand, and for the first time, I felt something, lightness, like a heavy weight, had been lifted off my shoulders. And in that moment, I realized I hadn't lost anything. I had just let go of something that was never truly mine. A few months later, I saw her again at a grocery store. She looked different, quiet but tired. She saw me and walked over. "Now I understand," she said. I didn't reply. "I lost you," she added softly. I nodded. "Yes," I said. A few seconds of silence. "Are you happy?" she asked. Without thinking, I answered, "Yes." And this time, I meant it, because now there was no noise in my life, no pressure, no one I had to prove my worth to. And maybe that's what real freedom feels like. And maybe that's the difference between a person who stays silent and a person who finally stands up. But now I want to ask you, if you were in my place, would you have endured this for so long? Or would you have stood up for yourself much earlier? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like stories like this, stories that don't just entertain, but actually teach something, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because here, every story is connected to someone's reality.